Well, hello and welcome to the 132nd episode of the Adoption and Fostering Podcast with me, Al Coates, and him,
Scott Casanrenny,
and her,
Elaine Amy.
Hello, Elaine. Hello, Scott.
Hiya. Hi.
Hello.
Hi.
Hi. Thank you for having me.
The pleasure, hopefully will be all of ours, but we'll wait and see. Maybe we should come back to that at the end.
Yeah.
Right, before we get into stuff, I have a bit of announcements, parish announcements and notifications.
Oh, no.
Scott, I have a small confession. I feel it's appropriate that I do this.
Okay.
That I've been, you know how we share a email, don't we?
Yes.
Right. Scott, I'm really sorry. I may have been answering people as you.
Oh, you evil man. There's all this rubbish, crappy replies where, no, you're not coming on. I bet that's psychotic. Scott, isn't it? I'm telling you.
It is. We've been getting quite a few emails from publicists from the USA.
Yes.
And so things like senators, even we had a senator who sent us a book and said, could you read this? And I didn't know what to say. So I just wrote back to them and said, thank you. I wrote back as you going, thank you so much for this book. I can't wait to read it.
Is that why my social media following has decreased over the last couple of weeks? Because you've been replying to emails in my name.
Yeah.
Is that
I'm not sure. I'm having so much fun. I'm not legally
don't have any more fun.
I write in the most flowery language, like, oh my goodness, I can't believe you sent me this book. I'm so excited to read it. I can't wait. And then tell them I'm not having them on.
Yeah, I think
so
in all seriousness,
I have to apologise.
If they're going to contact us and they want to pay us, then that's a different thing. I mean, we do not get paid for this. We finance this ourselves, etc. However, if someone was to say, I don't know, send me a Casper mattress. All right, if you're going to send me because Casper mattresses apparently are massive, sponsors of podcasts.
In the podcast.
Yeah. So
yes.
If you want to send me a Casper mattress, I'll take it on a 90-day trial. We'll see how we get on. that kind of thing.
Absolutely impartial reviews. Totally fine. Yeah. Yeah. Who do you think would be a good sponsor for the podcast? We should think about this. We could make money.
Yeah, it's an interesting thought, isn't it? Because I think if it was just like putting an advert in the middle of the podcast, say that I could probably live with. No, like if it was just, a little bit of a break, right? But I've listened to some of the American podcasts that are heavily sponsored by companies. And it's like at the beginning, sponsored by and then they have like, say an hour's podcast it'd be like a TV program. You'd have one advert at 15 minutes, one at 30 minutes, one at 45 minutes, and then one at the end. And they may all be sponsored by different people. So but it's interesting. I don't know who could sponsor us. Like, what is relevant? Who would you?
Sertraline?
We wouldn't want any. Well, but the thing is, right? If you think about like this story that the Americans
headache pills.
Yeah, probably indigestion. Oh, we could be sponsored by Rennie. It's such a dodgy kind of area to get into, I think, and. I would be a little bit kind of cautious of being sponsored by anybody. And let's face it, anybody who listens to the two of us, not our guests, obviously, because our guests are all amazing, but anybody who listens to the two of us, why would how would they want to sponsor us?
I don't know. So if anyone's got any ideas of good sponsorship that we could maybe reach out to,
apparently, according to some tweets, one tweet this week, we were sponsored by government. Yeah. I mean, we paid money from government for this. That was an interesting tweet that didn't get any traction, no likes, no retweets, nothing. So sorry about that.
Yeah. Apparently we are part of the Illuminati, but I must have missed that invitation to Davos.
Yeah.
I think there genuinely is quite a lot of confusion, isn't there, about who's paid by who's paid. The roles and responsibilities of different organisations, and some of it I don't actually know, but I do know that some of the stuff that's tweeted is not how it is.
Yeah,
bang on.
Got to be careful.
Yeah,
got to be careful.
Yeah.
Anywho,
any other parish notices?
I went to the adoption round table which sort of feeds nicely into that, which was all right. Was
that sponsored?
The good and the... Was I sponsored? No, I wasn't sponsored. I bunked off work and no one knew. No, I did tell my boss I was there and she went, "Oh, that's fine, get yourself away." But no, it was interesting. I mean, it was a literal whistle-stop tour through adoption. The ethical issues of adoption in an hour and a half with 4 contributors and 4 breakout rooms. So, yeah, it was a whistle-stop tour. But some of that stuff, actually, I've kind of... That's another place you can find out about that. But it sort of links in quite pertinently to what we're doing today, really, which is the reason Elaine... So, hello, Elaine. Hello again.
Hello again.
The reason I got Elaine on is because there's quite a few adopters, out there who kind of are quite progressive. And I thought it'd be really good to get a few of us together and have a conversation about some of these issues and how we kind of hold the tension of that those progressive thoughts and those progressive ideas with the reality of the fact that we are adoptive parents and we've kind of, we're stuck with it.
Yeah. Stuck with it. Seriously, think about the words before they come out the mouth, man.
Oh, well, that is my next set of words are really a caveat that this is a conversation between adoptive parents. And so if you're an adopted person, you may not like it. This isn't for you. This is not, if you were sat around a coffee table with me, I would speak differently or not speak, like Elaine said before we were talking. She'd be like, we'd shut up and listen. But so this may not be
your cup of tea.
What am I trying to say? It might not be your cup of tea. And we're going to talk frankly about some of the...
Don't come for us, because this is our experience and we're entitled to have our experience. The point of the podcast is for, let's face it, it's for supporting our community. There'll be some adopted people who don't mind listening to it, and we're grateful that you do. But if you're of a nervous disposition, probably not a good idea.
What the hell are we going to say?
And that's before we've even said anything about it, because we don't even know where it's going to go. But, yeah.
Yeah, I think it's a really good point, though. And that was one of the first things I was going to say as well is, the worst thing for me would be having a platform that a lot of adopted people are listening to, and I'm talking as an adopter as if I've got some credibility over the experience of adopted people. Absolutely, that's not how I see it. As an adopter, I think we are on a unique journey where we have to parent. We're already in the situation. We've got children. We have to make decisions on a daily basis, and we need to talk to each other sometimes and share some of our experiences. And I think recently, there's been a move away from doing that publicly on platforms like Twitter, because the adopted adult community and adopters have kind of like come together more and more, and it's obviously can cause pain and a lot of discomfort for the people, which I personally wouldn't want to do. But we do still need to have those conversations.
Feel seen.
Yeah.
Well, that's not unreasonable. I mean, I think that Twitter was an incredibly supportive environment for a while, but I think then we overstepped. I guess we didn't realize appreciate that it was a marketplace.
Yeah.
And so in that context, you've got to be careful, haven't you? You've got to be mindful of the other people who can listen and see what you're saying. And without the opportunity to give context or explanation, it can come across in a way that it's not intended.
Yeah.
Is that?
Yeah. But I think that if we think back a couple of years, there was, and we were, as parents, we were called out on it rightly, oversharing. And that, that's still happening, actually. I have to say, I don't do it anymore. If I was to put something on social media, I ask permission first. But there are still some people who post photographs, and maybe not so much on Twitter now, but certainly I see it a lot on Instagram. But maybe not quite. Instagram's different as photographs, but it's still the same thing. You're still posting photographs of children who may be vulnerable. I'm not questioning anybody who does that, but because I don't know their kind of history of the children, and they may have direct contact, and their birth parents might be quite happy for them to have that kind of situation. Who knows? It's not my place to ask or question, but certainly, the oversharing thing, we were all called out on it, quite rightly, actually, on reflection. At the time, it felt like an attack, but, yeah.
It was a real learning curve, wasn't it? I think
you're right.
And I think, for me, although there is times where, I feel like we need to have spaces for adopters to talk to adopters and also to influence each other as well and challenge some of our thinking. I do think that, that Twitter is not the place for that. And that, for me, was the real challenge, was realising that, you don't automatically have a right to share your views, share your story in a public forum. And if you do, then there may be some fallout from that. And for me, there was a bit, not much personally, I didn't share a lot, but, it was quite an uncomfortable few months, I think, for quite a lot of us. And I think, we all learned a lot from it, and we kind of shifted and changed in how we used that platform. And I think that, quite a lot of good came of that.
Yeah, definitely. So I was wanting to maybe unpack some of the sort of the complicated issues that I know that perhaps we've had as three of us. We all kind of know each other quite well, and we often congregate together in different social occasions. Elaine Amy is a reprobate and leads my wife astray on regular occasions.
Not anymore.
I think I can say that.
Well, not that I've seen anyway. Not anymore. Not anymore.
No.
I'd say I'm worse now than Elaine is, to be fair.
Yeah, basically, you both lead my wife astray and goad it into baiting me or whatever.
She doesn't need.
Your wife doesn't.
She doesn't need leading. She does it perfectly well on her own. So let's just make that quite clear. Yeah. Anyway,
nip that thought in the bud.
She's a very good friend of mine.
Yeah. All right. Well, I'm fond of her as well. So let's not a competition. Right. A question that I put out on Twitter a few weeks ago, and this is: so how does adoption support children's rights? Big question. Does adoption support children's rights? Because obviously we've got the UN Convention on the Rights of the Child. I think Article 2 says, that children have the right to identity, to a family life, to all of that kind of stuff. How does adoption support children's right to family life? You've both stopped talking. It's no good. I can talk forever, but does it?
Well, the invitation there is to kind of give a really straightforward, clear-cut answer, isn't it? As though there's a neat answer to that. But the reality is there isn't a neat answer to that, is there? Because, how adoption, well, I mean, the question really has to start much further back, doesn't it? Yeah. Is adoption the way that we protect children who can't live within their families? There's so many underlying principles that we're already buying into if we start with that question of, does adoption protect the rights of the child?
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? And I'm certainly not comfortable with adoption. I'm not anti-adoption. I did go through a phase where I was anti-adoption, but as my children got older, because when I first got to know you guys, I think mine were about, when I first met you, well, I think they were 8 and 9.
Yeah.
At Greenbelt a long time ago, and I think probably about 10, 11, 12 when we met you, Scott. But they're now 16 and 17, and I can't honour my children and their stories and be anti-adoption, and I can't really give all the reasons publicly for that. But understanding them and their journey has meant that for me, at this point in time, and it may change, I can't be one of those people saying adoption needs to end, because it's not where my children are at. And it would be incredibly disrespectful for me as a non-adopted person to say that publicly when my adopted people that live in my house don't agree with me and see my social media. So I can't be anti-adoption when they're not. So it's a journey, and, I'm following their lead. I've got my own thoughts and opinions. So I can't be fully against it, but I'm incredibly uncomfortable with a lot of it.
It's really messy, isn't it? Because there's no simple question. There's no simple answer. And I probably, like you, I think the pendulum has swung from being, when I was 28 to be totally like, oh, adoption's cool. now at 48, I was probably much more like, I'm not sure. I think that maybe we need to end it. But then the pendulum swung again, and I think, well, show me a better alternative.
Yeah, it's not okay as it is it? And I don't think many of us are. And I don't mean many of us adoptive parents. I mean many of us in our circles of close friends who are adopters. I don't think many of us are comfortable with adoption and feel that it's great and positive and the ideal solution for children. But it is what there is right now. It's certainly what I'm living right now. So I've got a limited capacity for thinking if only it was something different, because right now, today, what I have to live with and manage and all of the decisions I have to make are in this framework that we have now. So that's one of my starting point for now, but I'd like it to change.
It's I do as well, which is maybe part of the narratives have been driven by people who've perhaps got very different experiences to our children. Does that complicate it? You know, when you think about some of the voices, you know, some of the US voices are very different experience, and we could argue the toss about is adoption different in the US and all of that. But actually, I look at my children, I think that their life experience is nothing comparable to your life lived experience. And my children may never get to your place, and may never want to. And that's me talking for adopted people, but don't want to do that.
I mean, there's something in that which says to me, because I don't want to call people out on this thing that they call their fog. Okay, so coming out of the fog. Okay, because actually that could happen at any time, and you know, I've taken the decision this year not to talk adoption on Twitter. Okay, for my own personal reasons. I've muted the word. How it still shows on my bloody timeline, I do not know. Anything to do with adoption, I've kind of muted. So if anybody was expecting me to reply to something, sorry, but it's not going to happen. But then I see the odd thing, and I'm still, you know, I'm seeing an increasing number of people, and not just in the US. And this is the thing, because I'm not saying it originated in the US, but it seemed more common that people in adopted people in the US were saying about coming out of this adoption fog and what have you. But I'm seeing it more and more in the UK as well. And I'm not saying that I don't understand it, but there's part of me that wonders if there's similarities or if there's differences in terms of what they're experiencing. Because as far as I can see, right, and no doubt I'll be corrected if I'm wrong, the style of adoption in the US, people believe it's kind of a money-making thing. Yeah, so organizations make money from adoption. Now, in this country, a child can't be placed unless it goes through a local authority or a regional adoption agency. Yeah. It's a statutory agency, yeah. So there's no profit in it as such. Okay, there are voluntary organizations that exist to place for harder to place children. So, you know, I don't know, medical, you know, kind of behavioral, all that sort of stuff, siblings, etc. They're kind of, you know, engaged to provide therapeutic services, etc. So I don't know what I'm trying to say. I'm just saying that the two sides of this in terms of the US versus the UK, very, very different, but actually the outcomes potentially the same. And are UK adopted people seeing this kind of shift in the US where people are kind of rising up against adoption? Fine, cool, totally agree. I personally think that adoption has a place. I don't think it has a place the way it is. I think it needs to. There does need to be some changes made. We've talked about them lots on the podcast. Contact being the primary thing for me. But is it? You know, I don't know where I'm going with this. Really, I'm just waffling because I've got so much in my brain. But you know, is it the same? I don't know if it is. I guess the feelings are the same. You know, that those feelings of kind of how you feel when you become an adult through adoption. And you know, Al, you and I have got adult children who were adopted. I don't know if there's any fog for them. I don't know if it's something that just happens because you want to come out the other side, or is it a day of reckoning where you go, yeah, that was a crappy experience, wasn't it? And you know, this is what happened to me, and this is why I feel like that. I don't know. That was the biggest pile of crap I've ever spoken in my life.
No,
no, it wasn't. I mean, yeah, I get all that. When you start thinking about it, your brain goes down 12 different avenues. But to me, honestly, I don't feel that I need to think about this stuff. I'm not adopted. I'm not in any fog. I'm not adopted. I don't ever need to come out of any fog. Whether my children do or don't, do I need to know that? Do I need to make sense of that? Or do I just need to do my job of being the adoptive parent that I am, learn what I can and provide the conditions that I can for my children to have as much as is within my power, to have the freedom to make their own journey? Do I need to understand it? Because one of the things for me, I've learned a lot from listening to adopted adults. Some of that stuff that I've learned has caused the most tension in my home because my own children have been so cross with me about the stuff that I've then said to them. And they said, you know what, it's not like that. And for me, what I've learned is it's not my business. Do you know what I mean? This is not my area. I don't need to analyse it and give a neat view on it because it's never going to concern me to that degree. I just need to get out of the way. Do you know what I mean? That's how I feel with my own children, and not be threatened by wherever they end up and whatever narrative they create for themselves. If they manage to create a narrative for themselves, I will feel pleased. Yeah. Whatever it is. Do you know what I mean? That they've made meaning from their journey, resolved what they need to resolve, and landed somewhere where they feel they can function and own that journey. I see. I find that really interesting because my thoughts on that are, I don't want them thinking that anything that happened during their childhood to teenage years was as a result of me trying to direct them into a place that they shouldn't be, didn't want to go, etc., etc. So I think that's quite an interesting perspective on it, because I think as a parent, I just want them to be them, but I want to help them to get there. So like you've just said there, you pick up these things and you think, oh, okay, well, you know, I might try that, or this, I might say that. Yeah. Open up this little discussion about a thread on Twitter. So actually it can sometimes just do more harm than good. Yeah, although honestly, I don't think it's done any harm. I think it's been really helpful, even that. It's helped me to move, both listening to and learning from adopted adults, and then going and having conversations with my own children and getting shouted down and almost getting told, how dare you come and tell me that my parents are okay and not bad people? How dare you come and tell me, not necessarily that, I'm not saying that that's what was said, but, you know, how dare you paint this picture? You have no clue. I have memories. I was there. You don't know. And actually, that whole journey, that wouldn't have happened had I not shifted from learning from adopted adults, started conversations. And those conversations have been incredibly fruitful. You know, but my children haven't necessarily appreciated anything that I've learned or had to say. I haven't necessarily agreed with any of it. And over time, I'm kind of learning to take everything a bit more lightly. And even the stuff that I learn from adopted adults online, I tend now to just think, this is not my lane. Do you know what I mean? My children need access to this stuff. I don't. You know, I just need to not get in the way.
And it's so unique down to each one of our children, isn't it? Because they all have very different, my children all have totally different experiences and perceptions and experiences of us as parents, experience of pre-coming to us and experiences through care. And I find it really interesting, the whole conversation around this, because I think that it's something that I wrestle with. And, you know, do I feel a level of, I think sometimes the worst case scenario is that I've seen some adopters on Twitter who are like, oh, you're self-flagellating. I should never have done this. That's the worst case scenario. And then you get the other people who are at the other extreme are going like, adoption's freaking off you. And I saved these kids from a terrible thing and I am wonderful. Most of us are in between somewhere. And we, you know, really. I'm certainly not beating myself up for adopting.
Absolutely not. I look at my children, look at the journey that we've been on, and I have no sense of guilt or shame or that I've harmed them in any way. Would I like things to be different for children in future? I would. However, that wasn't available.
Yeah, I would totally agree with that, Elaine. And I'm very similar, and I love all three of my children. Even when they're a pain in the bum, just because they've been a pain in the bum. But then I'm a pain in the arse as well. So, I'm a parent. Yeah. So, I'm going to be a pain in the backside to challenge them on why, they've no money left at the end of the week because they decided to spend it all in the pub or, whatever it comes to. But that isn't necessarily about adoption. That's just actually trying to be someone who's looking out for somebody as well.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, because that's another conversation, isn't it? Is about the alternatives to adoption. I'm all for alternatives to adoption. However, I think my journey with my children would probably have been very, very similar in terms of our day-to-day lives. The fact that it is what it is was not what I needed or wanted. It just is. The framework is what it is. If I was a foster carer, if I was, a guardian of some sort, I would still want it to look like it has, and I would still want it to be well into adulthood, forever belonging, if they want to, with me. Do you know what I mean? A lifetime commitment, regardless of the legal, statutory framework around it all. It would still, in my home, if I had a say, it would still look like this.
So I have a question around that then. For all of us really to think about.
Yeah.
Are our children more vulnerable than some in terms of the future, in terms of independence, in terms of, being not educated, because they're all educated in their own way and they've all reached their milestones in their own way and stuff like that. But, in terms of being able to kind of make their way in the world where they don't need us, is that the issue with some of the stuff that we read? I don't know. I'm just putting it out there because I think that, I have one who's on a bit of a yo-yo string who leaves, comes back, leaves, but the door's always open. Actually, it's not a door anymore. It's one of those, spinning things. I have one. He actually said to me tonight, when we move to our new house, are you going to have like an annex for me to live in so I can get a Labrador? And I'm like, Brandon. Oh, I just said his name. Brandon, well, how long are we talking here? You're 23 now. but is that a thing? Because I do wonder about the vulnerabilities of some of our children. Elaine, you and I, your children and my children were older. It may have had a different kind of impact in them being older. I don't know if anybody's done any research and stuff on that, but I'm just kind of thinking out loud and in terms of whether that's a thing.
Do you know what I like, Scott? How Al keeps trying to talk, and we can see him trying to talk. And so far, it's gone from me to you, from me to you, to me to you, and the pen just going back in his mouth.
Well, he knows his place. In some ways, I struggle. I do know my place.
You know what it is? It's because every sentence he starts with, one of us jumped in.
I'll just record my own podcast on my own, just whittering on and release it. Just Al's thoughts. No, what I was going to get to was often when you see a lot of these conversations and like even the roundtable event, right? So you've got a lot of very articulate people who've got probably exceptional stories. Online, you've got people who are very articulate, able to express themselves in relation to their experience of adoption or their experience of being an adopter. And then I wonder that we've got a cohort of children right now, and I know, and you know, that the needs of those children are, on the whole, pretty extreme. That their experiences are the, let's presume, at the worst end of the spectrum. But the impact of that stuff is lifelong. Yeah. It's at least long term. And so actually, as much, and I often think that it gets complicated. So what those little children need when they're little is they need that belonging, that everything that adoption offers them. And as they stretch into adolescence and adulthood, then it's not fit for purpose. But actually, what my children needed when they were little was they needed to belong. They needed someone to go, like we talk about claiming, which is kind of language that I know is really, if I use that sort of language on the internet, there would be inflammatory. Gotcha days.
Yeah.
Being claimed is all very little child led that actually my children felt. I remember the first day I met one of my children, she ran up and down the street shouting to people, look at my new mummy, looking at my daddy, like a dog with two tails, just over the moon.
Probably more worried about
at 15.
To be fair, but whatever.
Yeah. But then at 15, they've evolved, and so adoption feels like right for children when they're little, but maybe does it need to be molded as it goes? Yeah. Does it need to be that constant supervision? Yeah. Does someone to come in and poke me with a stick and say, do better, differently?
But that's interesting, because 10 years ago, if I think back 10 years ago, we all said, you wouldn't want a social worker coming back into your life every however long, talking before the ASF, before we kind of, had all these kind of assessment things where we could get access to therapy, etc. I wonder if it's a journey that you go through now. These days, I think there's this is a spectrum, let's face it. So these days, adopters or prospective adopters, should I say, go through the process on the assumption that their children are going to need some form of intervention at some point because of the developmental trauma that they've experienced and all the stuff that comes with that. For us as older adopters, I don't know if we want to call ourselves that. I don't know about you, Elaine, but certainly for me, that wasn't something that was mentioned when we went through the preparation, when we went through this, that, and the next thing. Adoption support wasn't a thing. And so therefore, to be able to access that, it's kind of like admission of failure in some ways. Not just failure as a parent, but failure towards your children as well, because you've let them down, because, you should have been able to repair and for them to heal and all that sort of stuff, because that was the expectation placed on you, should I say. That's nobody's fault. That's just the way the system worked at that point in time. And we've learned so much more.
Yeah.
These are the kinds of things that I struggle with every day. Am I doing my best? Not just for my children, for me as well, because I am also human, and I also have a need to be myself, to make sure that I'm okay, etc. And I don't think that I place that kind of importance on myself. I place it more on my family.
Yeah, and I know that kind of, for me, it links a little bit to the question that you asked, Al. About whether our children are more vulnerable.
Yeah.
Because there's something about if I was providing a level of care for somebody who is significantly traumatized, and I was going to be doing that for 6 weeks solid, and then it was going to end, I wouldn't do it the way that I do it. However, we're nearly 10 years in, and we've got definitely another 10 years. And probably at least 5 of that, if not more, is going to be at a really high level. And so I have to be realistic about, this house has to function with 4 people feeling okay. You know what I mean? Apart from anything, I think it's very healthy, a healthy environment to live in anyway, to have a sense that parents also have needs, limitations, and have to look after themselves. And it's kind of about role modeling as well. But even if you put that to one side, because some of the therapies certainly that we were introduced to near the start of our journey were very much about centering the needs of the children in every interaction, every day. And, I wouldn't be able to still do that now. And sometimes the need is still there, but there's also a need for me to still be able to do this in 6 weeks, in a year. So it's kind of a bit of a balance,
and that,
isn't it?
Then rubs up against when we've got these big questions about, the big philosophical questions about adoption, and you go, hang on, look at the lived reality of an adopted child and an adoptive adult, and look at that, because it's all well and good sitting in your ivory tower having a round table event where you've brought in exceptions. So you've brought in a birth parent who is an exception, who kind of who has done amazingly and turned their life around.
Yeah.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
But you might be the exception.
Yeah.
Where we bring in...
We don't know, do we? I don't know what the exception is and what the rule is. All I know is about my children, my family, and obviously I know about both of yours. I know about the people that I know well. I know about theirs. But I'm in a circle of people where that really would be the exception. However, I don't know if outside of my circle that isn't such an exception. Do you know what I mean? Because we've just kind of found each other because of similar experiences and connected because of that. I don't know. And I would be uncomfortable describing a birth parent significantly changing to the point where they actually would be able to care for their children as an exception. I'm not convinced that it is quite the exception that we think. I think certainly in my circles, it's probably a lower number, but exception to me almost kind of implies a really rare event. And I don't think it should be.
And maybe we sort of come from a place of we're working on that, maybe someone can't parent a child, but that doesn't mean they can't have contact with the child.
Yeah, I was going to say that.
And it might mean, and it might be they can't parent for now, but what happens if they can parent in the future? And if, a number of years into the future, these are the kind of really difficult decisions that have to be made, aren't they? Because, children need timely, quality, good quality parenting care now from somebody. And that's, that's not debatable. Do you know what I mean? But, there is a real difficulty that I think lots of parents can, over time, be in very different circumstances. And that's one of the things about adoption that I really have a problem with, is there's no room for that. And to me, honestly, I find that quite unforgivable, that there's such a permanent decision made, for something that can change. But for me, I think most times where children are removed, it is for a temporary problem, but how temporary?
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Is it another 5 years? Is it another 10 years? Is it another year?
Yeah.
And, sometimes how it is right now is so awful,
It's a crystal ball, isn't it? That no one's got that. But then it begs the question, which you said, Scott, was of that ongoing social work involvement that refreshes and says, right, we knew that at 3 that it was inappropriate that the child had contact with the parent, but actually we've seen mum lately, and actually that might work at 9, and actually the vulnerability of your 3-year-old is not present in a 13-year-old or a 16-year-old. Well, potentially isn't. I had a really interesting conversation this week with from the Adoptee Rights Law Centre in the USA, and it's on a podcast coming up in a few months. And one of the things he was advocating for, a lawyer who runs the centre, was saying that at adulthood, children get to make a choice about what they want to do with their adoption. That actually it just becomes like at 21, they're given the opportunity to say, "Oh, I'm sticking with it. It's fine."
I really like that. I mean, how can we not have that? Really, given that adoption is about safeguarding and protecting children who need protection, you can't apply that into adulthood.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? There is a time limit to that. But I do think that children, I'm not a big fan of some of the alternatives that people talk about that would leave a child vulnerable to an adult being able to say, actually, this isn't working for us. You need to put them somewhere else. For me, if I said that, I would be accused of abandoning my children. If I said, take this child away, this child abandonment, you can't do that. And that's how it should be as well. But I think you're right. I think for children, there needs to, for adult children who then become adults, as they grow and as they reach the age of being able to make decisions for themselves, they need to be able to opt out and also opt back into their birth family. But what can't happen is that there isn't an option for them of this family where you belong forever. I don't think children should lose that.
I think that's a really interesting point, because we're in a situation where between the 2 adult sons, one has really positive contact with some of his birth family, the other one doesn't want anything to do with it. And for me, all I've said to them is, look, if you need me for anything with regards to this, then I'm here. You know, if you want advice, if you want, you know, words, if you want whatever it is that you want, if you just want a soundboard, all those sorts of things. But what I would have loved was for them to be able to come to this point where actually we knew the people they're talking to. We know who they are. We've met them. We've done this with them. We've done that. You know, whether, you know, we can talk about whether it's birth parents and all that sort of stuff, and whether it's appropriate. You know, we can talk about that till the cows come home. But my point is, I know that the one who doesn't want to have that connection it's because he's scared, because we've never had the opportunity to open them up to that, if that makes sense. I mean, I wouldn't have just thrown him into, you know, like an overnight, you know, away with his birth family. That's not what I'm talking about. What I'm saying is we've never had the opportunity because we weren't allowed to. You know, nobody gave us that access. We could have done it through Facebook. We could have been really brave and bold and all those kinds of things. But who knows how that would have turned out? You know, we wouldn't have had the support of others to be able to make sure that was okay and that was correct, and it was for the best, you know, for the boys and all that sort of stuff. I guess what I'm saying is that, you know, I wish that we'd had that opportunity. You know, it's not compulsory, but I wish I'd had that opportunity to be able to do that, because then actually they could have made decisions based on other reasons than just fear of the unknown. Because that's, you know, we're talking about biological family here. We're talking about blood, you know. That there shouldn't be much fear unless there's a reason that he's, you know, just not saying about, which could be possible. You know, let's face it. You know, you don't tell everybody everything, and I don't confess to be the, you know, the person who knows everything. But yeah.
Well, I remember having a conversation with, I think it was Dawn on one of the podcasts, and she talked about this idea of that she didn't want to engage with her birth family out of disloyalty. And it wasn't that her parents or adoptive parents were putting any sense of guilt on it. It was out of a genuine sense of, I want to be loyal to my parents, my adoptive parents. And you just think that if there could be a world where you could, at whatever, 20, 21, 18, that someone could sit down and go, well, what do you want? But not me. Not someone who was trusted and knew at the top. And kind of went, well, I can open that door for you if you want.
Yeah, and I think that's the point. I mean, we've had those conversations all the way through, but I can't open any doors. So, you know, there's a limited value to me knowing how my children feel and what they would like, because, you know, if I've got absolutely no access to any information whatsoever that enables me to make decisions around balancing the cost and the benefits, the safety and the risk, you know, it's just conversations about feelings, isn't it? Whereas I think what I would like to see happen is, you know, a parallel process where when children are within their birth family, removed from birth family and beyond, into adoption and beyond, birth families continue to be supported, you know, and that there is some ongoing recognition of where they are at, with the potential to reignite those discussions with adoptive families or wherever those children are, whoever they're with, kinship, foster carers or whatever, you know, because it's not only adopted children that have no contact with birth family. We've got foster carers that live very close to here, and they are permanent foster carers. That child has no access to his birth family. He has his legal name, but he has no access to his birth family, and nobody knows anything about how she's doing or where she is. You know, so it's not just an adoption issue, but it's about a parallel process for me about the professionals involved being able to then open doors and say, right, this is how things are at. With the birth family, where are you at? Where are the children at? Is there any way that we can inch something forward for a bit of healing for everyone, a bit of connection? And sometimes there won't be, but sometimes there will be.
Interesting, because I reflect on across my gazillion children, literally 1 million children. It feels like that most days. That what is really odd is I've seen this really peculiar power dynamic, the shifting of that when my children were teenagers, the kind of a door opened and there was some sort of my older children. This is there was a reconnection that like it flamed bright and then it just ebbed, And then 10 years later, the power dynamic is fundamentally altered, that my children are adults. And these people who were loomed large are now older adults, and kind of like the power dynamics have shifted and the threat has just gone. And so now they're making their own way, and some of my children are up for that, some of my children are just indifferent. Conversely, I've got other children where the danger is really clear and present, and probably will be.
It's really sounding like you have an awful lot of children at the moment. But these children who think it's these and these other children over here.
How big is your house, Al? Just have you moved since we've last seen you? Because, it sounds like you've got like 1 million bedrooms and,
No. Well, the story, we moved from an 8-bedroom house because every room was full, right? Because there was 6 children, 3 adults, 2 dogs. And we moved house thinking, because a couple of them had moved out, which is great. And literally the day we moved in, one of my daughters returned home like with her bags packed, crying because everything had broken down and we hadn't got a bedroom for her. But
that is a thing. Can I just be saying that is a thing? I know, Al, you would love to just go to a 2-bedroom cottage somewhere. In fact, the last time I was over, that was a discussion that you were having with Mrs. C, who was having none of it, to be fair, because she likes to entertain, she likes people, she likes company, whereas you don't. But it's a thing as well that goes forward, because we moved house last summer. And we struggled to find a place because I was adamant that we had to have enough bedrooms just in case. And that's another kind of dimension to this parenting malarkey that we've got. I don't know if my mother-in-law or my mum ever thought like that. If they ever thought, okay, so I've got this many children and this how many bedrooms I need to have just in case. And at what age do you cut that off? And, at what age do you stop thinking in those terms? So that is another aspect of it, isn't it? In terms of being a parent.
I've got a friend who, he's similar age to me, and I'll keep the details vague, but he's got children who are they are going to remain vulnerable adults. And he's a very good parent. Him and his wife, as good as you can get. Did everything right. System literate. You use the system, work through the system. His granddaughter's going to be adopted because his daughter can't maintain a lifestyle, is kind of, there's just that really complicated mix. And you go, that story's not being heard.
Yeah.
And he's heartbroken, but also acknowledges that because of his age, him and his wife's age, they can't do it. And they don't want to do it. They're pretty broken by the nature of their parenting experience.
And don't you think some of the difficulty around all of those decisions is because of the nature of adoption? Because a lot of people who take on grandchildren or, kinship carers is because they are threatened with, they will be adopted otherwise, and that will be the end of your relationship with them. And actually, I know if one of my children were to have a child and couldn't care for it, what I would want would not be for me to parent it, because I am their parent, and the conflict, I would struggle with the conflict of that, because I am their parent, and I would wish to remain primarily their parents. And I think it complicates things. But, I would also want there to be an option for somebody to bring up that child who has the energy, the youth, the enthusiasm, the home, the love, but with relationships intact. Do you know what I mean? That would be my desire for my own children if they were in that position. And that's where I think, adoption has done so much harm. I stand by, I don't feel guilty or ashamed of a decision that I've made to adopt, but I don't, minimize or dismiss that an awful lot of harm was caused by my children being adopted. And I would like a different system that minimized some of that for the children, for the birth families.
See, hashtag Elaine Amy, saying it as it is since 20 whatever.
Keeping it real.
It's true. You're so right. You're so right. You do that. I think that's probably why I love sitting talking to you, because when it comes to stuff like this, you're right. You say what others are thinking in that respect, because it's true. It's true. It's so true.
But the flip side to that is, I think that what you get from adoptive parents is almost every adoptive parent I've ever met made a promise to a child: I will be your dad or your mum forever. Forever.
And that's it, really. And that's what I want my children, who are, you know, probably walked past that door a few times listening. You know, I want my children to know that adopting them made me happier. Do you know what I mean? And I know that that's a really contentious issue, and that, you know, some adopted adults feel they served a purpose for their adoptive parents, and it wasn't about them, it was about their adoptive parents. All I can say is, in my relationship with my children, I want them to know that my life got better when they turned up. Do you know what I mean? And
can I pick you up on what you said there? Because I think that it's a massive red herring. I was thinking about this and I thought, oh yeah, that's awful that people have gone, oh, I want to adopt because I want to adopt. And then I thought, but what parent doesn't have a child because they want a child?
I honestly, I adore these girls, and, you know, as much as it might sound, it might not be what some people like to hear. My truth is that they have made me happier. You know, my life has got better. There's just nothing is worse. Do you know what I mean? You know, and I wanted to parent, and I love parenting them, and I love them, and I love watching them grow and develop. And, you know, there's a real joy for me. And I would hate to say to them, do you know what, I did this all for you. But do you know what I mean? I did this all because you needed a family.
That's, I think, the objection from maybe what I've heard in the community is that people saying, oh, it's a terrible reason to do it for yourself. And I think, but every parent, biological parent, does that. They don't have children that think, oh, I'm going to have a baby to save a baby. That I'm going to have a baby for me because I want a baby, or we want a baby, or we want it to be, I don't know. What do people have babies for? It's the most fundamental human urge, isn't it? To have children.
I don't know. I never felt that need. I never felt that need. And, you know, for me, this is a rabbit hole that I've never gone down, because I never felt the need to biologically have children. So, yeah.
No, I didn't either.
So why did you parent then?
I didn't feel the need to have a baby or a young child. I did want to parent.
I think there's a difference. I think there can often be a difference.
But I didn't feel the need for that child to be biologically mine. I also didn't feel the need. I'm not great with babies and toddlers, honestly.
That's so not true.
I like children. I really like children, and I'm finding teenagers
I like them.
Quite nice.
You know when I like them? I like them when they get to eat.
Is that only
when they go to shop to buy beer, they bring you back a bottle of wine? I mean, it's an amazing thing that they do, you know, without even being out. No, I'm joking, of course I'm joking.
That's it.
You know, and like, I really don't want to dismiss the feeling that some adopted adults have, that they, you know, some of the people who say, you know, this idea, you know, but some of those people, they literally were paid for. Do you know what I mean? You know, and how can you make meaning out of your story if it started with, you know, a person who was perfectly capable of looking after you, but actually didn't, and then you went to somebody else who really wanted their own birth child but couldn't have one and were childless? You know, I can't imagine how difficult that is to process and make sense of. And I do think sometimes for some of our children, you know, and I'm not saying whether this is true of mine, but some of our children that have been hurt and removed, there is a meaning to it for them. That means they make sense of it much more easily, I think. You know?
Yeah, and that's interesting because I keep saying about podcasts I've recorded, but Rachel Baker's coming on in a few weeks, and she's an adopted adult, and she'll say, I'm so pleased I was adopted. I remember what happened to me. You know, and that if you want to seek out Rachel Baker on Twitter, fantastic. And she'll fight anyone for £1 over that issue. And so lots of people going, yes, but she goes, no, I know. You can't, you can have you can stick to your truth, that's fine. But my truth is this: I know what happened to me, and I know it was better. And you go, that's not a voice we're hearing very often. No, because the dominant voices are often people who've got a different experience. I don't know. I mean, I feel like we're drawing out the rocks of trying to make sense of what adopted people say on Twitter, which is a fool's.
Yeah, which is what we didn't want to do, isn't it? And I don't want to do that anyway. I don't want to take everyone's experiences, analyze them, and come up with conclusions, and then feed them out as some kind of truth.
You started off by saying this is,
really don't want to do
that wasn't your place, and that's not our place to do that either. So I think that's bang on. This is a discussion for us to have, really, isn't it?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. But I did want to just say that, I do want to acknowledge, as much as I understand within my own family context, the journey of, removal, adoption, whatever, the journey that we've had since, which, I don't really talk about, with exploration into contact, etc. I do recognise there are a significant number of adopted children out there when they have restarted contact, and actually, you kind of think those parents could parent these children now. Do you know what I mean? And they were adopted into another family, permanently severed. This parent has gone on to have other children, or not have other children, but certainly would be a safe parent. And I think that is a real issue for me of how that happens much more often than it should. I wouldn't say whether it's the norm or not, no idea, but I do know it's not a real kind of outlier. Do you know what I mean?
One is too many.
So that's a concern for me.
I think that when we came away from the round table, some of the key issues were that why is there not more early intervention? Why is there not more support and contact? And actually, because it seems to me like the huge issue for me is that my children have always wanted to kind of make sense of their story. And like you say, Elaine, for some children that's really easy because they can go, well, X happened, so Y happened, so I'm here. For some children that's just not available. But contact or communication, or whatever that looks like, can often really make sense of that for children.
Yeah. And one of mine, I will say, is at a point now of saying that, I am going to need contact, whether it's safe or whether it's not safe, and whatever it might look like, we need to find a way, not because I want to build a relationship, but I want to know. I don't need to find something good. I just need to find it. I need to find it. I need to know it. I need to understand it, whatever it is. And interestingly, I had a conversation with a friend a couple of nights ago on the phone, a friend I've known for years, and she's in her 50s, recently located her birth dad, and she's just had a journey of getting to know him, and it was wonderful, and then it became awful, and now it's over. And we were sort of talking about how she is, and she said, I know now. That was what I needed to know, and I know. And I think that's part of the crux of it. It's not about creating anything particular. It's about the knowing, isn't it?
Scratching that itch, and you may not, like you say, you don't care what you find, you just want to find something. And I think that,
just want to find
good
it.
or bad.
Yeah.
Ooh. So are you going to adopt? So I guess the end question is, are you going to adopt any more children, then, Elaine? You up for it?
Do you know, that's a really interesting.
I was only
question.
joking.
I'm not. But at one point, I would have said I would never adopt again because, I really don't agree with the whole idea. I wouldn't do it again because it wouldn't suit my children and our stage of life and stuff. But, would I adopt again with it being the current framework? If circumstances, were where that was something that we wanted to do, I think maybe I would.
Really? That's interesting.
Yeah. Because the framework is what it is. And yes, it needs to change, but it is what it is now. And that is the thing that's on offer for children now.
It offers something that, well, I think...
I want you to answer the same question.
Yeah, Al. Please say no.
Well, I had a really interesting conversation with my children. So we had Sunday dinner, and we've got a very big table. Got a Sunday dinner, and all of them were there, and we had this conversation. Would I do it again? Right, so that's like a really gruesome conversation to have with your kids. But that's the way it rolls around out here. It's all out there. Elaine. Both of you. It's all out there.
Yeah.
There's no dark corners.
Yeah,
all on the table. And I kind of said maybe, and they all went, "Oh, what do you mean?" And I went, "Well," and I think the question was. Would I do it again? Maybe. I couldn't say for sure, and that maybe reflects just current weather. But the interesting question is that I'm having therapy, Scott. Just so you know.
I know, mate. You don't have to tell me. I know.
How do you know that?
Yeah.
No, about time now, really.
Oh, she's been talking to you again, hasn't she? That's rubbish.
Just to confirm, we know that is not possible, because that would just be going down a massive rabbit hole with GDPR and that sort of stuff. So that doesn't happen. But what do you mean? Go on.
But I said to the therapist, I said, I've had a great life. I've not got no regrets. So I think that yes, I would do it differently. I would be more abrasive, and I would fight for the rights of my children much more. That's what I would have done. So in relation to Contact specifically, I would have kicked up a big fuss about things being different from a long time ago, really.
Yeah.
What about you then, Scott?
Yeah.
Oh, I know my answer to this. So no. And the reason I'm saying no is because I'm too tired. I'm being genuinely serious. Okay. It's hard work to introduce a new child or children into your family life when you've got an established family already. And to be honest, husband is way too old anyway. He's over the hill now at 50. So,
Meow.
But no, I mean, listen, there comes a time where you need to start thinking about yourself as well, in terms of looking after yourself. And by having another child, I just couldn't physically do it. I couldn't mentally do it. I couldn't.
But we're not asking if you would do it again now. We're asking, would you do it again if you?
No, that's
would you if you went back?
See, well, we're on different pages then, because I was asking.
All right.
Now.
Okay.
So.
Now, no. What the heck, no. Massive no.
See, you need to think about your context of how you're asking these questions. If you said to me, would you do it back in 2007 when I first did it? Yeah, of course I would. Nothing would change for that, And that documentary I was watching this week, we're all naive. We're all naive.
Shut up.
Oh, what about those families?
1998 it was started to film.
Yeah, I saw that.
Someone from
Sarah Jahal was in it.
There was Northeast, there was Kent, there was Leeds, and there was somewhere else, London as well. Yeah, But what was interesting about that was there was a lot of pickups from that said that was us. In some ways, not for everything. Can I just say there was one really very weird couple up there.
Is it that religious couple?
The cult, I think they were.
I was gone strangely quiet.
Anyway, but no, I seriously no, wouldn't. I couldn't. I don't have the emotional bandwidth to be able to do it. No, I would do it again. Of course I would. I wouldn't change this. I love my kids. I love the life I've got. There's things I'd love to change, but there's things that I also accept that I can't change. Isn't that one of the step things as well, isn't it? Where you just have to accept that some things you will never change and you can't change. You just got to be.
Are you in the air?
No, I'm not in the air, but I've heard.
All right, okay, just checking.
But yeah, so there you go.
One of the questions that we haven't really touched on, isn't it? And I don't think we should, because
why say this? Like,
for too long anyway. About how do we influence change in the future as adopters? And I really struggle with that one at the moment, because there's a lot of conversations on Twitter. And, I do sometimes hear a call for adopters to do something. I have no idea how to do anything. I don't even know how decisions are made. Do you know what I mean? I'm not in any of those groups or panels or whatever. But I do think it's a really good question. Yeah. And I think if we could figure it out, I think there's, on all sides of adoption, I think there are an awful lot of people who are ready to do something to influence change. And
do you know, I think you've got a really good point there, because I look at someone who I know whose child is in reception or primary school. And she is having exactly the same issues as we were having 15, 16 years ago in school. I know that's just one area of kind of discussion, but education is massive, isn't it, for our families? Education is
Yeah.
probably the biggest pressure that we've got for our kids. You know, it hasn't moved on.
Yeah.
You know, a 4-year-old being excluded from
What?
Yeah, I mean, come on. Like, why? What's that? And I see the parents getting very, well, I'm going to fight this, I'm going to do this. And I want to say to them, I don't, but I want to say to them, listen, we've been, you know, we're trudging through the same footprints. You know, we're just a little bit ahead of you.
Yeah.
Kind of thing. And I don't know the answer to that question. I wish I did, because I'm telling you right now, like, it sometimes makes you wonder why we do what we do in terms of sitting on, you know, some of these things that we sit on and try and influence discussions. You know, you go to more roundtables than actually anybody else that goes to a roundtable. You know, you actually go in more roundtables than ministers go to roundtables. And are you making a difference? You know, are you actually earning that MBE? I don't think you are. I'm going to be honest, because what changes are we seeing?
Thank you. I think, right, so this is me, and I do think about this a long time ago, and a long time ago, an awful long time ago, I thought to myself, right, things need to change. What can I do? I think that the conversation's different. I think that there's a lot more conversations being had, and there is a lot more agreement in the so-called triad about things like contact. Everyone's going, it's not working. Even if we can, we've all got maybe different stances and different positions in relation to, it needs to be like this or that or the other. But everyone agrees it is just not fit for purpose. And that is universal from everyone. And I think that being in that meeting, the round table, which was kind of feeds into the care review, which I think is where it gets interesting, is that is something that potentially has the teeth to propose a change. I think someone like Sarah Jahal is very progressive, and I think the legislation gives you scope to change that. So I think the stuff from the Nuffield Family Observatory, which is they did a digital pilot study on that. We got people like ARC in the Northeast who are doing stuff, which we're hopefully going to speak to.
Yeah.
A digital. I think that if we get it to a place of digital, that opens so many more doors for different forms of communication. So I think if we get contact, we get everything. I think if we get contact, it unlocks everything.
Yeah.
So I think we're closer than you think.
I think it's definitely moved, hasn't it? Even certainly from 5 years ago, when we knocked the door of it was before regional adoption agencies, and said, you know, we would like to meet birth family. We didn't get to meet them. I'm deliberately not being specific. You know, we didn't get to meet them during the introductions where there was a meeting set up, and we've asked repeatedly, and the first few times we asked, it was almost like there was a kind of a shock and confusion about why this would happen. But I think that is different now, and I think, you know, people were doing things themselves, you know, making their own contact and things. But I do think now there has definitely been a shift. I don't think it's nearly enough at all, but there has been a shift that those conversations aren't met with surprise anymore with professionals.
Absolutely.
You know, there's an acknowledgement at least that it's not unusual to ask, can you help us to think about contact?
Yeah, and we know, Scott, that if I put a podcast out tomorrow that was about contact, it would get picked up more than all the other ones. If I put a webcast on Wednesday, it would get higher viewing, because people want something.
I think they're desperate for that validation that it's okay to think that they can go ahead and do what they want to do, and to challenge or to make contact, or, you know, whatever they feel confident doing for the benefit of their child. You know. I don't think there's anybody who would make contact without kind of looking at the risks first, you know, looking at potential progress and how they've changed. You know, we're not talking about sleepovers here. We're not talking about, you know, saying, oh, hi, can you babysit for me? You know, we're not talking about that. We're talking about them having a connection with their biological family. And that's a really important thing. And, you know, I think as time goes on, we'll see more and more evidence that says it's good for a child, and it's also good for them as well, you know.
Yeah, one of the things that one of mine has mentioned, may not happen, may happen. There's a whole journey that we're in and a whole journey to go through. But one of the things that has been mentioned is, would it be possible to create a social media account that was completely separate, didn't have any of my connections or friends, where I could communicate with this particular person and never ever meet them? Because at the moment that there's no evidence that would be a good idea, and there's evidence that it could actually really not be a good idea. But there are still ways, aren't there? But we would want and we do have this set up, thankfully, that there's a process of, first we've got somebody who's going to help my daughter to think about that and really explore it, and that's just starting now. And then there's somebody from a birth family support agency who has already made contact with birth parents and made some kind of assessment, who would be the person who would then go and have that conversation. It wouldn't be as setting up a Facebook account and doing that and then helping to make that connection and possibly talking about literacy and those kind of things, but you need people at work in their jobs whose it falls within their remit to do this. And I think
that is change. I think that, I think we're part of the same RAA. So I think that people like yourself who are asking them, do this, please do this, means that it is precipitating change. I know that they've set up a ukulele evening for adoptive parents, and that to me is just probably the difference between success or failure around here. So I'm going to sign up for that, and I might do a live podcast from it if that's okay, Scott.
Well, I've heard your singing voice this week, so it's going
to be yeah. So I think things are moving on. That's me. We are going to have to draw this to an end, and I do think things are changing. Elaine, you have been fantastically insightful. I'm not sure where we started, where we got to, and how we ended up there.
Where we ended.
Adoptive to be fair, it's better than if we were all in the same room together, because Elaine's not a big drinker, but we do tend to go down rabbit holes in terms of our discussions, so maybe we've been a little bit more focused because we're not all in the same room and we don't have hours now, so maybe
we're being recorded.
Oh yes.
Yeah, a little bit.
Slight impact, doesn't it?
So if anyone's got this far and they're slightly offended, you could have just turned it off.
Yeah, don't be atting us, don't be tagging us, don't be atting us, or whatever it is to say, what these people say.
Or our Illuminati friends will come and break your legs. No, that's not true. No one's going to get their legs broken.
No.
We're not.
My God.
It's just joking.
My phone's ringing. Look, my phone's ringing.
You're not finished there.
Right. Yeah. Okay, well...
No, I'll just put her over there for a minute while we wrap up.
It's been lovely seeing you all, and look after yourselves, and I'll meet you for drinks shortly, I'm sure. Bon Jovi.
Well, I'll see you at the ukulele group.
I'll be at the bar. I'll be at the bar waiting on you.
See you when you're next in the UK, Scott.
Excellent. Bye.
Bye.